Welcome to a brand new episode of Sequel Rights, the podcast where we take a look at the franchises that make you go, they made how many of those? And we give each and every sequel a fair trial. My name is Justin Camps, and I'm here with...
Elizabeth Helly.
And...
Tyler Hymanson.
And before we go any further, we have a very special guest with us today. We have the editor from The Purge, Pete Gvozdas, with us. Pete, thanks for being here.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Of course, of course. So we're kicking off a brand new franchise here.
My favorite episodes are kicking off franchise episodes. We get to kind of get new characters, get new things. I'm super excited.
Yeah.
To get into this dystopia.
That's right. So
It's actually a documentary from the future.
So without further ado, let's commence the trailer for The Purge.
Tonight allows people a release for all the hatred and violence that they keep up inside them.
Why don't you guys kill someone tonight?
Because we don't feel the need to, Johnny.
Just remember all the good the Purge does.
We'll be fine just like always, no worries, okay?
This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual Purge. At the siren, all emergency services will be suspended for 12 hours. Your government thanks you for your participation.
Help me! Someone, please, help me!
All right. That was the trailer. Man, things are getting intense in America.
Praise be.
We've got Pete here with us, who edited the film. And, why don't you just give us a little background on how you got into editing, like what brought you to this project?
I lived in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was working in sports and news as an editor, and a friend was at a Maine film school and shot a short film and called me to cut it. And that was my first experience doing narrative. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And started talking about what would it be like to work on this full time or like work in Hollywood. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, kind of got tired of that and said, enough talking, and why don't you go do it? So I came out here and went to the ACE lecture series, the American Cinema Editors, and learned a lot of information from them. And then within a year moved. I started out doing reality documentaries, and then got into the union and started out as an apprentice, worked as an assistant, first assistant, visual effects editor, 3D editor. And I'd had some history at Bay Films and got a call from Platinum Dunes, his production company, and they gave me this awesome opportunity.
That's fantastic.
It's amazing.
Overnight success, right?
No. Years in the making.
Absolutely.
You just tripped into the editor's bay.
Yeah.
No,
saw the door, snuck in.
That's right.
Just started working the machine.
That's great.
So early on when you were doing some of the news stuff and editorial, what were you cutting on? Like, what was kind of your process? Was it always kind of offline or online, or
When you're getting dailies, or
when you first started out, just
working in the reality stuff?
Working in reality stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I was working as an assistant, and it was a night job, and we only had one avid, if you guys know what avids are. So the editor worked the day shift. I worked a night shift from like 7 till, 4 or 5 in the morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like I said, overnight success.
Literally overnight.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So getting into the Purge film, do you want to talk a little bit more about this film specifically, or is there anything more about the background of like kind of leading into narrative, or was this the first narrative film that you cut, or?
This was the first, film that I was the lead editor.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd done some additional editing on some films, but this was like the first one where you're it.
Man.
Yeah, it was huge.
That's
Was that kind of nerve wracking? I mean, this is actually, there's a lot of really interesting editorial things in this film that are incredibly tricky, and we can get into those when we get to talking about the film.
Sure.
But when you first got the news where you're like, oh man, I can do this, or you're like, oh no, like now I'm in the spotlight. I have to.
Yeah, I had confidence I can do it. But,
Sure.
But at the same time, you're like, all right, now you have to.
Absolutely.
This is why you moved here. These guys are giving you the huge break. Like, it's time to deliver.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, why don't we start diving into the movie a little bit here? So I don't know what you guys think. I'm sure everyone thinks this, but like the main like premise behind the Purge and the series as a whole is like, I think one of the like best premises that has come out in the past like few years. It's like it's genius. I think it's genius, and there's just it leaves so much room open for storytelling. So the basic premise is that the new founding fathers of America have instituted something called the Purge. And does anyone want to explain what the Purge is?
First of all, the basic premise of the movie is that we're all violent animals.
Well, okay, yeah. If you want to go super macro with it.
And that we need to let these aggressions out, and this new government, in their wisdom, has created an evening once a year where everyone can just release their violent instincts. It's a healthy, normal thing to want to murder, and so they've sanctioned it. And so for one night a year, you get to do anything under a Class 4 weapon, which we don't necessarily know what that means.
Yeah. Also, it's not just murder. So
Anything.
if someone's like, I just want
to launder all this money.
Yeah, I like my neighbor's dog, and I want it to be my dog. I have now stolen the dog, and they can't do anything about
I think
it.
that the one loophole here is that, the Purge takes place on March 22nd. Like, you can commit tax fraud. Just file your taxes early.
Oh, yeah.
I like how they say all crime is legal, including murder. So
I mean, not to be like a downer, but like as a woman, I was immediately like, wait, so everybody can just rape everybody now? But of course, they don't even touch that.
That is implied, yes.
Yeah. That's it does
Maybe,
say all crime.
maybe future films.
Oh God, I hope not.
I hope
Yeah.
not.
Well, yeah. Oh well.
I don't
But
know.
yeah, even in this first film, although they don't dive into it completely, there are some people already saying like, well, the real reason the Purge is happening is to kill off poor people, like so that there's less people on Earth, basically.
Yeah, the beginning of this movie, so the movie sets is kind of like based around this whole family, but the beginning of the movie does like a lot of world building, and like throughout the movie you get little glimpses of like what this America is like now, and I was like eating all that stuff up. Like,
yeah, there's a choice made really early on to make it like, let's make it seem as normal as possible. So like the style of the film starts very sunny, and it almost feels like a after school special type, like they're a cookie cutter type normal suburban family.
And we do get a log line there that says that it's 2022. Did we mention that? Okay.
No, we didn't listen to it yet.
So yeah, it's in the future, but not so distant that we can't really feel like it's,
it feels like
reachable.
present day, basically.
Yeah.
And so in terms of when you guys are putting the edit together and kind of doing that early world building, like what were some of the choices of trying to make it? Because the pacing of this film is actually really interesting. It's pretty slow burn. There's also like these suspense vignettes that kind of have to build on each other. Kind of early on when you guys were starting, what choices were you making in terms of how you were assembling that kind of...
Well, for example, that opening drive sequence, Ethan Hawke driving home, that was the original title sequence. And it just felt like at that point you want the story to start. You don't want to have to see titles. So then we created the piece before that, which is like a standalone main title sequence. And that was, let's get ugly, violent images and counter it with really pretty classical music.
Right.
So I built the first mock-up, and I used the song Claire de Lune, which was the song I walked actually down the aisle to.
Oh, wow.
With my wife, but I always liked that song, and she liked it, so I threw it in, and it worked, and the director's like, that's great, let's keep it. I was thinking, oh, my wife is... Why did you just ruin our wedding song?
Oh my God.
But luckily she was super cool. It's like, no, it's fine. Go for it. Yeah, but then we got nervous because then the scene with Ethan in the car, it was shot kind of fragmented and jumpy, and even the dialogue and what was happening, because it was designed as like a title sequence, and we're like, can this work as a scene? And it took a little bit to kind of make it feel like a standalone scene.
Yeah, I thought it worked really well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love contrasting like one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written with like just horrifying images. Like, I when that started playing, I was like, this is genius. I love it.
You mentioned Ethan Hawke, so we should mention that he's the star of this movie, and then we have Lena
Headey.
Did we decide that's what it was?
Yeah.
Okay, Lena Headey, Cersei as the mom.
Yep. And the kid from Parenthood.
Yes. And the girl from Rain.
Yeah. Max from Parenthood.
Yeah, that was the child star check-in because anyone can go on IMDb and look at what they're doing. It's not that exciting.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's hard when we do these more recent movies.
yeah,
That's right.
Everyone's like, they're still kids.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it for me. Bye.
And she never talked again.
So you kind of get the younger son in this family. There's some other like subplots going on within the family, but you can tell that he's kind of the one who's like, wait, like why are we doing this?
Yeah.
I get it.
He's kind of the moral compass of the film.
Yeah.
We should say, go ahead.
Actually, the movie takes great pains to show that this is a loving, caring family. Like they Ethan Hawke, they have a family dinner, and like he's at like, how was your day? And doing a very like you're supposed to like these people, like, a lot. Like they're trying to make you. There's nothing ominous about them. It's just like we're just good, patriotic, loving family, and this is just what happens.
Well, but yeah, it's a little bit morally complicated since he is the salesman of the security systems that all the rich people are using to lock their homes. So. One thing that I want to make sure that we mention early on, there's a scene in the kitchen when the mom, Mary, is cooking and she sees a report about the Purge on TV. And so you got to tell us about that and how that came about.
Yeah, it's actually me on the television.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So originally it was a Purge commercial, like a PSA that we shot and that we had visual effects comp it in. And after a test screening, we got a couple people saying you have people in the film say, "Oh, look at all the good the Purge does," and they were saying, "But what good does the Purge do? Like, you're not really explaining that for us." So the director said, "All right, that's a moment early in the film where we can get some of this information in. Let's pull out that commercial and put in like a 60-minute style sit-down interview." And so he wrote it up, and just to get like a proof of concept, they recorded me, we popped it in, it was kind of working, we left it in for another screening, it worked fine, and it just lived there, and then everyone forgot about it. That's awesome. Then we're getting near the end of the movie, and I'm thinking, well, we have to get that done properly, like shot correctly, visual effects, and the director and producer was like, well, your performance is fine, so let's we'll shoot you for real. Yeah. So they brought a crew down, lit it. We did like a real interview and had visual effects put it in, and I'm in the film.
That's awesome.
So that was the beginning of your acting career then.
Yeah.
An overnight success.
Yeah.
That's really fun. And the doctor, they left your first name in there too. So.
My first name, the last name is my grandmother's maiden name.
Wow, that's so cool.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
Dr. Peter Bynek.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, then moving on in the movie, Charlie, the boy, we discover that he's got a robot that is the baby from Toy Story, and it drives around the house.
What's his name? Timmy?
Timmy. His name's
and
Timmy.
he loves vintage music.
Yeah.
That's right.
He loves creepy music from the 1920s. And
that song is weird, you guys.
Yes. It has a camera, and so we discover that a lot of footage will be seen from the point of view of this robot. So how did you guys decide to incorporate that throughout the film?
They shot like a bunch of scenes with it, and then it was just, when do we want to see it? When do we need to see it? And it was a lot of trial and error. And is it too much? Initially, we tried to make it creepy, like you don't know what's watching her or what's following her. Oh, you realize it's this like demented doll toy.
It does kind of set up that it does that scene where you're not supposed to know what's watching her, and it kind of sets up it as a creepy point of view. And then there's some different scenes. Like there's a scene that it's probably my favorite in the film, and I think it probably was pretty tricky to assemble. It's when it's jumping ahead a little bit, but it's when the Purge just started, and there's a guy outside who's helpless, and they've let him inside the house.
Yeah.
And there's a point where the premise is that a group of purges have come out and they've been hunting this guy, and they say either let him, like, bring him out here or we're going to kill you and your family. And Ethan Hawke has decided, all right, well, we got to find this guy. And so there's this kind of classic going through the house in the dark with flashlights suspense sequence, but it's unclear who you're actually rooting for and who's chasing who. And there is some of that from the doll's perspective, POV shots in there that kind of balance it and give it this creepy tone. But it's a chase sequence when you're not really sure who's chasing who. And so I think that it was really fascinating to watch how that came together. And I think that it must have been pretty difficult to put together in the edit room.
Yeah, because you have to somehow convince this stranger in the house that this doll is his adversary, and how to communicate that on screen to an audience. Because he had talked about earlier how I silenced all the motors. You can't hear this thing driving through the house, which allows him to sneak up behind him. You don't know at that point what Charlie wants to do with this device. And he doesn't have any way of verbally communicating, like, hey, I'm going to actually help you.
Right.
And he's just flashing lights. And luckily, it just you kind of get it. And that character gets and acknowledges to the camera. So yeah, I was picking those pieces.
Absolutely.
It's just like, how do we tell the story so it makes sense? And yeah, and hopefully you're rooting for Charlie too.
Yes. Yeah. And
Save this man's life.
Depending on
and that's how it comes through. But like that's kind of the amazing balance of the scene where you're kind of like what is he doing? What happens? And there's some just really nice like creepiness that comes from the point of view and not knowing, but there's some mixed in with some nice performance moments that really sell it and kind of takes you on this journey that not easy to communicate visually. Yeah.
And then intercutting with the mother searching the home and him navigating this guy to his closet. And
and it's to the point where it almost flips. And there's a couple reversals in sequences like this where you're like, oh, like, I don't want her to find him. Like, that's it's a very, and you kind of don't realize it happens, until you're 3/4 of the way through the sequence.
Yeah. Just to jump back, the way that this homeless guy gets in, Charlie lets him in basically because he feels bad for him. And I also thought it was funny. This character never gets named anything but Bloody Stranger, like even in the credits and IMDb and everything.
Yeah. I was mad about that because I was like, why would you let this guy in? It can only be bad.
I mean, we've established that he's a unique kid. He doesn't follow his parents' directions.
I might not have given the kid the disarm code.
For the
$1 million security system that protects everyone's lives.
And do you let humanity take over in those moments when you see someone in need outside your home?
Right? Yeah, I mean,
pleading for help. Do you trust that person?
That's true.
It is tricky because you don't know.
It makes sense that
is this person going to bring harm into my home?
Yeah.
Or are they being?
And it does make sense that like a kid would make that decision. Like,
it's more believable, I think.
Yeah, most adults would probably be like, "No,
we can't trust him.
I didn't see that guy."
It is weird because the movie leans into so hard in the beginning of this is an accepted thing, it's normal, it's great, everybody's on board. And as the movie goes on, you realize that the Sandin family hasn't really thought about it all that much.
Because it's never affected them.
Well, and they've become rich off of it.
And it's never affected them. And so I think that there is a youth. It is interesting how the movie treats young people and how they've been indoctrinated to the Purge or not, because the main people that are the main aggressors throughout the movie that are trying to get the man out of the house, the masked people that you've seen in the trailer and everything else. Yeah. I mean, they're basically the Young Republicans Club.
I literally wrote Young Republicans Club in my notes.
Yeah, it's a little scary.
But it's not, these forces of old and evil. It's these people who have totally bought into this. And so like maybe their son is somebody who has a little bit more humanity and humility in him. But it does kind of like when he makes that choice, because the movie leans so hard into like, well, this is just how everybody like lives their lives. It's a little bit like, well, why is he doing that then?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And they do make some comment like when they're starting to get see everybody outside, they're like, stuff like this doesn't happen in this neighborhood.
Yeah, in this neighborhood.
Yeah. So the little boy lets the Bloody Stranger inside, but the reason he's able to get, out of the foyer is because the daughter's boyfriend springs out of nowhere with a gun trying to kill the dad because he won't let them date because he's not old enough. Or she's not old enough and he's 18. But one thing I read, and this, again, IMDb trivia, so grain of salt, and maybe you can tell us if this is true, Pete, is that originally the director and writer, James DeMonico, wanted it to be the daughter actually trying to kill her father, but the studio said no, and so instead they brought in this boyfriend character to do it.
I think I heard of that.
Okay.
But I don't think I ever read a script or a version.
Got it.
I know they never shot it that way.
Yeah.
It does feel kind of like a weird turn of events, like,
Yeah.
because he's so like, oh, I'm just gonna go talk to him and we can finally hash it out man to man.
That's the loophole of the Purge, though.
That's true.
The one thing that is strange is that after she pulls the gun, like, she runs upstairs with him. And it's like, oh, is he okay? And I'd be like, what the fuck? You tried to kill my dad.
Yeah. And it's like,
hey, we're 16 and 18. I don't want to date you that
what
bad.
was it?
Like, you know?
What was that kid's goal? He's gonna kill her dad, and then they're gonna run off together.
She's going to be in love with him
She's gonna
after
be
that.
so happy, like, thank you, finally.
He forgot that the Purge ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that boyfriend got killed. But the point is that then the bloody stranger is now
shoots
in
him
the
in the
house.
chest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, you know, as a surprise.
Right.
Yeah, go
That
ahead.
was actually one of the most challenging scenes
Oh, okay.
to get right, because it was a longer scene when the parents confront Charlie at the door with this stranger. There's like a one-sided conversation where they're trying to figure out who he is, and he won't answer any questions. He's just silent. Why did Charlie do this? He's trying to explain why he did this. And then all of a sudden, Henry shows up on the stairs, and it's, how did he get in the house, and why are you here? And there's a conversation, and it was too much talking. It was starting to deflate the tension. And I remember one morning the director came in and he goes, "This is how it's got to work. This moment, especially when Henry's got the gun, it's a punch to the face to the audience. It's just, whoa, where did that come from?" So then we just really condensed it, and it was the guy gets in the house, they confront him, Ethan pulls the gun, now the kid shows up, he's got a gun, and everything's shooting.
Yeah, I did love that, like, you know, they're so protected against, like, outside forces that, you know, they were not even thinking about anything coming from inside, and so it is like a crazy surprise.
I'm curious, like, and how to make that work, because it does work so well. Did you have to go back and adjust the scenes beforehand to have him so he's not telegraphing as much that he has ill intent to her?
Yeah. You're looking at performances. You want him to feel like he is on the daughter's side, and he's going to legitimately talk to the dad and try to sway him.
Yeah, because you have no
They're
idea
in love
he's
with
gonna
each
pull
other,
it.
and then it becomes, when do you introduce him leaving that bedroom?
Right.
And when do you introduce Charlie hitting the disarm button? And it's like a puzzle. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So the stranger's in the house.
He is.
Dun, dun,
And
dun.
now he's hidden, so they can't just kick him right out. But,
Yeah, instead of like acting like a nice, innocent guy, he
Yeah.
goes sneaking around, and so you're like, wait, is this a good guy? What was he running from? I don't know. Yeah.
But then we get the freaks, or the young Republicans.
Yes.
They come to the front door, and thankfully the family has that Ring doorbell. No, they have a security system.
They do have a Ring doorbell. Yeah.
So they're able to see. So the freaks are wearing these like creepy plastic surgery lady masks.
Yeah.
And but their leader just looks like that naturally. He's not even wearing a mask. And,
I thought that was great casting. You're like, we need to cast someone who has like charismatic, like Cheshire Cat smile.
Yeah.
And I was like, that guy looks creepy. Yeah.
And he is the complete opposite.
Oh,
He's an Australian, and he's just like this young, handsome guy, super laid back and like funny, and then he just turns on this insanity.
Oh man,
When the
that's
camera
great.
rolls, yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So yeah, then that sets up kind of the main premise that gets us through a huge portion of the movie, is that we got to find this homeless guy, kick him out, so that these guys won't kill us.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they've got that ultimatum. And so during this whole part, we get all these shots of the freaks like hanging out in the front yard and stuff, and Charlie and everyone's watching them on the screen, and they keep like pointing
Keep
their
doing
guns at the
creepy
cameras.
stuff.
Like,
Yeah,
see
they're
you.
like making out with the masks over their faces.
I swear
they're
there's-
riding on the swing. They're just doing like generally creepy.
I don't know if you
horror
guys saw
movie
this, but I
things.
swear there's one shot where it shows these dudes on the yard, and I swear there's a guy like doing a yo-yo in the background. Like,
Yeah.
there is, right? Yeah. I was like, was that guy just playing with a yo-yo? I was like,
Yeah.
Scary.
they're just doing like these mundane, creepy things just because they don't give a fuck. I
So
guess.
was there just like a ton of B-roll with that, or was those
Yeah, 'cause-
specific shots?
Yeah, we knew that the security system was a big part of the film, especially when they're in their security room. So it was, okay, how many cameras would this system really have? And then based on that, what angles would you put? Would someone really put these at? So we tried to realistically put them in real angles, and then what action do we have to recreate that? And so yeah, to answer your question, there was a lot of B-roll.
Yeah. I'm like, wait, this one here? Like, okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like a quad monitor. Other times we decide to bring things full screen. Yeah.
And some of that stuff, just because of the visual language of the movie, there's some times where it seems like it's kind of like, and I think the movie does an amazing job of balancing out that security footage. But when you're kind of getting with the pacing, it seems like it's a good device to be like, all right, well, we need a little transition here. We need something to space it out. Like, let's get, we can throw some of this B-roll here.
Yeah, we would do that a couple times.
It's something that seems like it's a very good organic kind of, not Band-Aid's the wrong word, but it's a transition. And I think it does it really well.
Yep.
We actually had one listener question from friend of the show, Val, and she was hoping that we would ask you, because the film takes place all completely just in this one house, like how do you edit it to build up suspense when they're really just kind of running around in circles in the same area over and over again?
I mean, that's a credit to James's script, that he just keeps things moving, and no one gets to just settle and like have a moment.
Yeah.
As soon as someone relaxes, then something will break, or something turns off, or someone, presents new information. So yeah, that's really the script.
Okay. And then how do you kind of show like the geography of the house, like the layout, so that people kind of know where everybody is?
Yes. Well, some of that's done early on, where you are meeting characters, but you're seeing Ethan come home and come through his front door, and how does that connect to the kitchen, and what's that relation to the staircase that takes them to the upstairs where bedrooms are, and as hopefully that stuff's starting to settle in.
Yeah.
Like the layout of the house.
Okay.
And luckily it was a big home.
Yeah.
But it's not like crazy supersized where you're going to get lost in it.
Okay. Cool.
But it's still big enough and dark enough when the light's out that you could hide.
Yeah.
And you could evade being captured.
Was most of it shot at the one location? Or
Yeah, the entire thing was shot in that house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in Chatsworth.
Yeah.
It's kind of near where Topanga hits the 118.
Okay.
It's right in that area.
Nice.
Yeah, the whole thing was shot there.
Getting back to his point,
Yeah, there's. Oh, go ahead. Just sorry to interrupt you. There was a couple additional days that we shot on sound stages.
Sure.
Like the scene in the with the pool table.
Oh yeah, the big fight scene.
I was gonna ask about
that was
that,
done on
yeah.
a stage.
I was going to say that was the one room in the house. I was like, well, where was that room?
Next to the creepy
It
basement.
was funny when they first showed that room. I was like, oh, cool, they got a pinball machine. And then 1 second later, he slams the guy into the pinball machine and it shatters everywhere. And I was like, oh.
I wanted to play it. Yeah.
I want to get back to his point about how the script just does move along. And one of my favorite moments in the movie is that, and nobody gets as soon as everybody thinks they're in a safe space, another piece of information is offered or something's there. And it's in that same sequence where you kind of don't know who's chasing who and who you're actually rooting for at this point. And it's when the homeless man gets into the crawl space, and then we see, Lena Headey, moving through the house, and then we cut back to him, and he's worried about the flashlight turns it off, but then you see he has a giant knife.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, I really don't want her to find him, but I don't want, I don't know who's going to hurt who, but just introducing the knife is a really great kind of, it just moves everything forward in a way that's like, oh, it's more information. It's like, now I don't know what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, and you never really know until almost the very end whether or not this guy is like, he could also be a bad dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
because he doesn't speak, so you're not entirely sure his motives.
Yeah, and he's like always hidden for most of the movie.
Yeah. So,
and you've learned he's killed one of these other purgers.
Yeah.
So you know he's capable of violence.
At some point, he gets a hold of the daughter kind of as a hostage, and Ethan Hawke's trying to get her back. And that's when Ethan Hawke and Lena Headey marry. They kind of are able to get a hold of this guy, and they start duct taping into a chair. And that then comes the whole like intense scene where we're all arguing about like, why are we doing this? So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, that was
sequence.
actually one of my favorite scenes.
Yeah.
Even though it's really dark and disturbing.
Yeah.
It's one of the first scenes that was shot. It was, I put it together and found it very tense. And I thought James did an amazing job like staging it and getting performances, and I wanted to show it to him right away. Yeah, so it was the first thing he ever saw. It might have been the only scene he saw during production.
Oh wow!
But he was like super ecstatic, and he was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm feeling the tension. The actors were killing it. Like, this is great." But yeah, it was a difficult scene.
Yeah,
I loved in that scene. The bloody stranger starts to kind of like escape a little bit because he's got duct tape around his arms and legs, but he's still can like get free from this chair, and he's like writhing around, and Ethan Hawke's trying to hold him down, and Ethan Hawke's like, Mary, get the knife and touch his wound, because he has a wound on his chest, and he's like, touch his wound, and she takes it, and like instead of touching the wound, she's like, stab, and then it's like, touch his wound again, stab, and I was like, oh my god, he said like touch it, not make it bigger.
Go big or go home, right? Yeah.
But it totally worked.
I mean, to me, like this sequence is the entire movie, and like it makes sense that like that was the scene, like the only thing you saw during production. Like that's crazy. It was the first thing you guys shot, and I think it does a really like. There's so many reaction shots that you have to put in, and reaction shots that you don't necessarily read, and then there's all this intense action that's happening, and it's kind of this culmination of seeing the two kids and his wife, and as like the more reaction shots, the more humanity builds in. As the audience, you start to question it as well, and it doesn't become sappy. It evolves really organically of them just being like, well, why? Like, look at yourself. Why is this happening? Yeah, and you kind of there's an adrenaline and tension to the scene that it kind of when it gets diffused, it's like, yeah, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, well, it, like that one scene encapsulates all the main questions of the movie, like. You know, Charlie's asking his parents earlier in the movie, like, would you guys ever purge? Like, have you ever wanted to purge? Right. Like, and so, yeah, this one scene shows that, like, okay, maybe you say you don't want to, but in certain situations, you might just, like, lose that tiny bit of humanity and just do whatever it needs to be done. Yeah. And I love that they, like, questioned that afterwards. Like, Mary is really upset about the whole thing.
So the result of this whole confrontation is that now they've changed sides, and they're gonna all try to kill the freaks instead of surrendering the bloody stranger.
Which I personally think sounds like a bad idea. I was like, you got one person who knows how to use a gun, another person who probably could use it but isn't super great, and then you give a gun to a kid. And the daughter is knocked out.
Yeah, and a concussed daughter.
Oh, yeah, the daughter's concussed. Yeah, I forgot
so
about
you're like,
that.
I don't think your odds are super great. There's like, I don't know, 15 of them or something.
Sure.
But they break in.
Yeah, the whole time the freaks have been saying like, our provisions are on the way. As soon as I get here, we're going to be able to break down your thing. And there's another scene I love too that like earlier on when he says that Mary is asking James, Ethan Hawke's character, like, this is your system, right? It's totally fine, right? We're safe. And he's like, yeah, we're totally safe. It's past 99% of the trials, and like it's totally fine. And then like the very next scene, he's like, okay, listen, they can totally get in here, definitely for sure. Here's 7 different ways
they could take a tunnel. They could get a battering ram.
Yeah,
it's just like
they could smoke us out. I like that one.
But you sell these, you sell security. It's like, yes,
I know. I just told you that it was fine, but really, no. It's not.
Oh my gosh.
Which I thought was great.
Are you familiar with the term snake oil?
Yeah. Also, yeah, the dudes like just attach chains to these giant steel things that came down over all the doors and rip them off pretty easily, it seems.
This is a thing for future. Well, and like again, I have a few purge rules that I wanna get off my chest here, because I feel like Ethan Hawke's driving home and he's like, it's like, 62 minutes till the purge starts, and it's like, I would give myself more time. LA traffic, no, like 62 minutes is way too close. But also, if you have, and then her boyfriend staying over is like, like 20 minutes till the purge starts, like better climb out this window and climb her home.
You're like, do people really honor that time frame?
Yeah.
Is it like each year the purge gets a little longer?
But so there's a point where Ethan Hawke's looking at yachts in this movie, and he's like, ooh, like this boat has a garage, and it's like, if you have this crazy security system, and I get like you don't want people in the house, like if you want that, and maybe we'll see this in future purge movies, but like in Impenetrable Panic Room, like you have your.
Well, he kind of admits that it's, really more for intimidation and show than anything else, which, like, I hate to break it to everybody, but isn't that kind of what all security systems are?
And things like this don't happen in our neighborhood.
That's exactly what it is.
So
Like,
you just don't. It's like
they haven't thought about it in the way that could possibly affect them. It's like it's something that other people do. Like it's fine, it's patriotic, but like we choose not to, and that's fine. It doesn't involve us. Which I think is it's certainly saying more. But my dumb logic brain is like panic room.
Complete lockdown.
So when I told some of my friends that we were doing this movie, I hadn't seen it yet, and everybody said, yeah, I remember that I liked it, but that there's something that happens like in the third act. I don't remember what it was, but that's when they lost me or whatever. And I was like, what? And so then when it gets to the point where the freaks make it in the house, and then the main guy just stabs Ethan Hawke right, like with a giant machete, right? And I was like, oh, that's probably what it was.
I like that scene.
I like that scene.
Yeah,
too.
I don't know.
And it happens right after a pretty awesome action sequence.
Yes,
that I
the whole
imagine
pool table situation.
which was crazy fun to cut. Because like there's a bunch of the freaks that get inside the house. And Ethan Hawke has it's just like a shotgun that has a giant handle on top.
I was
of
like,
it.
that is a badass shotgun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
so we got that shotgun, and it wasn't even released to the public.
Oh, damn.
God.
But the manufacturer let us put it in the film, and I remember seeing it in the dailies in the scene where he gets a handgun out when they lock the house down. And I was like, that's a cool looking shotgun. What is that? And luckily we used it later in the film. The pool. Okay, so to go back, you had mentioned when you saw the scene at the dinner table.
Yes.
You're like, oh, you like this family. They're a good family. So initially, audiences didn't like Ethan. And they really wanted to like Ethan. And he was a little more abrasive as a character. A little more abrasive to his kids and his wife, and a little more absorbed with got to make the money, got to sell stuff. And so we took that note and surgically went through the film and looked at how he spoke to people, what were his mannerisms off camera, and we just added smiles and lightened his delivery and even omitted some lines to make him more likable. So I'm glad that you felt like this family's likable. Because there still is some tension with the kids.
Sure.
Like the daughter is a little irritated with him. But so we did a lot of that on its own, and then we realized, okay, we're going to need like a hero moment. Because he always got stabbed. But he initially, I think, if you remember, he shoots a guy in the kitchen. And then he walks around the corner. That's where he got stabbed initially.
Oh, wow.
We then added the scene in with the pool table to one, we get the shotgun back. So we really use that.
Sure.
But give him like a badass hero moment.
Yeah.
He's protecting his family.
Well, and then before the lead freak comes in, Ethan Hawke looks at these bodies, and you can tell he has this moment of like, oh crap, what have I done? Like a remorse.
Yeah, basically almost like young kids.
Yeah, he's like, I killed these people, but you can see it in his eyes. And he's like, but my family, but death, and But before he gets stabbed, I personally thought it was cool because I wasn't expecting, of course, the main character to be offed like that.
Yeah, and it's so shocking after he just had that big hero moment, like you said, using that video game shotgun.
But it gives weight to his choice of really feeling the remote of him seeing what the Purge for what it is, and I think that gives the I think that there's a reason that I could see the performance choice of him being a little bit more abrasive, a little bit more ignorant, and that's really the type of person that there is. But I think that there's a cathartic moment of him seeing the error of it and fighting for something that's against it that works just as well. But it's a really interesting kind of.
Because initially he's just profiting off of all
he's just profiting off of that, and I like it's one of those notes that you hear is like, oh, he's not likable, but I feel like that usually you disagree with those type of things, or I do, but I think that it does make a stronger film.
Yeah, it also helps lead to almost like one of the most messed up endings. Yes. Doesn't quite go all the way.
Yeah.
But you know what? Before we get to that, we have actually our first sponsor.
Oh, yes.
This week.
Yay.
We are being sponsored for the first time by the lovely people at Vorail. You can find them at www.vorail.com. They make a product called the Podcast Companion. It's for those of you out there who may be visually impaired in some way. It's a new, I guess like
device.
Device, that allows you to interact with podcasts using a dial without having to, use a computer or anything. And also, it has this great feature where people who listen to the podcast can ask questions through this device, and then you can respond right back to the device and kind of like use it as a fun way to communicate and reach new people in your city and across the globe. And it's just really something excited that we're excited that they're sponsoring us, and we're
going to be on the platform so people can listen to us on there.
Going to be featured.
Super excited about it.
And they are very interested in your feedback, your listener feedback, our listener feedback, your friends' feedback. If you can just take one moment to go to their website, www.vorail.com, that's VORAIL.com, and take a very short survey. It asks literally like 4 questions.
If it's really like one
It's
question
just like,
and your
If it's
name.
5, you're gonna have to take back that literally.
No, it's like, what's your name, your email, favorite podcast, and a very swift
Well,
question.
that's easy because you already know your name and email, and obviously your favorite podcast is
Yeah,
Sequel Rice.
of course. So we're just asking that you guys take 2 seconds out of your day to go fill out this survey. It would really help them kind of get a better feel of what people are looking for and how people would like to use their product, the Podcast Companion. So again, that website is www.vorail.com. Check it out. Let's get back to it.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end.
We are. So Ethan Hawke has pretty much bit the dust at this point, and his families are all around him.
By a very large knife. This knife is
it's
giant.
huge.
Oh yeah, I was like, everyone in this movie has the biggest knives and the biggest, fattest machetes.
I feel like that the main people that profit from the Purge are knife and tape manufacturers.
Yeah.
if you make a packing tape or a duct tape, Purge is great business for you.
Well, and guns.
And guns.
Yeah.
That goes without saying.
Yeah.
Well, you guys asked about the Class 4 weapon.
Yes.
We never explained specifically what that means, but it kind of alluded to you can't use a nuclear weapon.
Right.
Sure.
Okay.
You can't just nuke a city.
That's good. That's probably a pretty good rule. All right, newfound fathers. Good on you. I love the end
I
of
hate
the
Cleveland.
mass murder.
Yeah. It's like, all right, Golden State, no more championships.
Oh no.
Last ring for Kurt.
Yeah.
Oh man. So let's talk about the ending of this movie a little bit.
Yes.
The ending kind of, shortly after this big scene where Ethan Hawke gets stabbed, we kind of start this like Deus Ex Machina train of
The movie takes an even harder right.
Yeah. We see that some unknown people, well, I don't know if you know who they are right away.
You recognize the neighbors when they in the security footage.
Yeah, I thought that's who they were, but I kind of was like...
I was like, oh, it's the cookie
They don't
lady.
reveal themselves right away. They
He knows the
kill
cookie lady.
You
they
see a
kill
couple
off the remaining freaks.
Yeah. Right.
And then the family is like holding the body, and they're like, what the heck happened? And then the rest of all the neighbors come in.
Yeah.
She just wanted her plate back.
Yeah. It's true. Hate it when people don't give back that Tupperware. Yeah.
And so they're like about to get killed by by the polite leader. And these neighbors come in and shoot him up like full of bullets. And the family is all around James, Ethan Hawke's character, who is on his way out. He's dying.
Yes.
And what I was saying, like, I love that he got stabbed here, and then it sets up almost this crazy ending where like he dies thinking like everyone's safe, my family's safe, and then he dies, and like immediately after he dies, the neighbors reveal that, you're not their Purge victims. You're our Purge victims. And you're like, oh shit, they're not here to rescue them at
The
all.
neighbors are basically like, well, once we saw your gates were down, we all decided to come kill you because we don't like you.
Yeah, we
took
hate
our
that
money.
you stole, but they bought those things. I don't know why they're so mad.
I know, right? Buyer's
Did
remorse.
he force them to buy them? I don't think so.
They're just jerks.
Yeah.
Rich jerks.
But I love that he dies thinking his family is totally safe.
true. I
And
didn't even think about that.
Yeah, immediately after that, like they're in the most dire straits. Like they're getting tied up. They're all gonna like execute them right in the thing.
They get taped up.
Yeah, she's like, let go of my son. And the one guy's like, shut the hell up, Mary, or I'll shoot him right now. I swear to God. And I was like, Jesus.
And their plan is to they're very much embodying like how the Purge has almost this religious quality of like, oh no, we just need to get the hate out. And so their plan is to take turns stabbing them.
Yeah, and they get in like a prayer circle and start going like, oh, thank you to the Purge gods. Or whatever.
Blessed be the fruit. May the Lord
Yeah,
open.
they start saying some prayer and you're like, whoa. And then someone steps in to stop him.
Does he have a name? No.
He goes by the Bloody Stranger. who actually is a great guy, apparently.
And I think he's the only character to show up in the other films.
We don't know yet.
We don't.
Oh, yeah, we haven't watched. What? No, I'm kidding. No, that is really cool. So it turns out that he was actually a great guy, and
he helps Mary subdue the neighbors, basically, and they actually don't. He kills one when he jumps on the scene, but they don't kill the rest of them. And we get this great sitting around the table waiting for the purge to end.
I love this because she's like, "We are ending this night with no more violence," and I thought like, "Oh, she's just gonna like let them go home."
Right.
But no, it cuts to a scene where they're all like having the most awkward Thanksgiving dinner.
I liked it because I was really like, oh, I see Cersei now, because she was like sitting there like at the table, like looking at everybody, making like really like dry comments, you know?
Yeah, and everyone's sitting there so awkward, and like, doesn't the one lady tries to
one lady tries to get one last chance in at her.
Yeah, she lets her go down a little bit. She has her hand on a shotgun.
Yeah.
And the lady just tries to grab it, and then
she shuts it down immediately.
Hits her and then breaks her nose twice. It appears like,
which is awesome.
Yeah, she's like, "I said no more violence."
with the butt of a shotgun, and then slams her face into, much like the pinball machine, right into the glass table.
And she's sitting there like oozing blood out of her mouth, like. Oh,
I almost feel like it's the most practical blood. Like it's a lot of blood. And it's great.
It was pretty awesome.
We had one producer say, because she ends up spitting it out.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh, is she spitting a tooth out?" I'm like, "No, it's, you put the blood in her mouth, she's spitting the blood out." Is that a problem? No, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I for sure thought there was a tooth.
We could get a tooth.
We can add a tooth.
I could have sworn there was a tooth also. Must have been her fingernail looked like a tooth or something like that. Oh, that's so funny.
It's funny when you test these films and, like that character says there's no more violence. Especially at the end when the guy has untied the family. Mm-hmm. And he's got the gun and he says, "It's up to you, Mary. What do you want to do?" And she says, "We're done. No more violence."
Right.
And you can hear people in the audience going, like, "Shoot him."
Yeah.
Shoot him. What are you doing?
It's messed up.
There's like this bloodlust that people have.
So I'm actually really curious. It seems like that did you go to some of the test screenings while it was happening?
Oh yeah. It's part of the process. So you're cutting the film, you get it to a place where it feels good, and then you'll put it up in front of an audience.
What was it like, just your first feature that way of kind of getting that direct feedback of being
I
in the room
really
with
enjoy
them?
them.
Yeah,
I really enjoy test screenings. It's like I don't get on stage and tell jokes or play instruments. This is kind of how you can create things and then show it and present it to an audience.
Yeah.
So I love the reactions.
Yeah, it sounds like a really cool process of just like, oh well, does that play the right way, or maybe I can dial that up a little bit more. Like people aren't gasping enough at that. Like maybe we can make that a little bit more intense.
And when you see like a joke land or you see the scare, and you can watch the audience and they're grabbing the person next to them or hiding their face, like it's exciting.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, this is working.
They cool. Make a reference in the behind the scenes feature about how there was like an original cut of the film that was almost more like a satire, and then they cut it to be.
No, I don't remember.
I mean, there's
there's a little behind the scenes feature out on the Blu-ray, and the director or somebody
I think
says
it was
like
the director,
there was a couple early cuts that were like too satirical, so we had to dial it back.
Yeah,
and make it more realistic.
Yeah, I guess some of that and more really hitting the commentary, like the social commentary.
Okay.
Yes, there was some of that.
Yeah. That's cool. Well, yeah, so the movie kind of comes to an end. They let everybody go back, and then we get this fun kind of like the credits start to roll as we hear like news reports of what happened at the Purge.
The Purge does start and stop with a really cool siren.
Yeah.
Do you know what the sound is on that?
It's something that I found in a library.
Wow.
And we tried various sirens, and that one really stuck. Mm-hmm. And then
it's super distinctive.
Yeah.
And then the sound, I'm glad you liked it. And then the sound department took it and really added this cool low end to it.
Nice.
So in a theater, it really it really hits. The scene at the end, your Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
So in the original cut, the two kids are at the table.
Oh, dang.
And when we shot the scene with Ethan at the pool table to make him a little more heroic, we then shot the bit where the kids are with him on the ground. Mm-hmm. Like the mother looks and they're kind of down the hall. So we couldn't then have them walk to the table.
Right.
So, but we had to keep that existing scene. So we had to remove angles that showed the kids.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes we were stuck, depending on the dialogue, we had to keep what we already had. So we had to like blow footage up or reposition it to get them out of the frame.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's kind of tricky.
What was it shot on at the time?
I believe on an Alexa.
On Alexa?
Yeah.
So you could still blow things up, but not as much fidelity as you have now for...
I guess depending, even then, like you could shoot, I think, like 5 or 6K.
Okay.
So yeah.
So there wasn't too much trouble kind of repositioning in that way?
No, it wasn't an issue where we were nervous that, oh man, this will be all grainy,
Yeah.
bizarre looking.
Yeah.
No, luckily, those cameras have a lot of latitude.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I wouldn't have even known that was a thing. Yeah.
That he had to cut that together.
Yeah, I know.
With 2 kids behind his back.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think there's so then the stranger leaves, and I think there's one shot where it's in essence from behind Mary's head of him exiting the house. It's actually Charlie's head from older footage.
That's funny. I should go back and
The
watch that.
silhouette is similar enough.
Yeah, they both had really dark hair.
awesome.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting.
So over credits, you're talking about this audio clip kind of
Yeah,
wrap up.
news.
But like still more world building. It ends with more world
Oh,
building,
yeah, totally.
which is interesting.
I was like, this whole movie, anytime there was like a news broadcast or people talking about what they do, like the neighbors saying like, oh yeah, we might stay in and watch some Purge events. I'm like, is there like TV shows on that are like,
It's like
here's
4th of July.
Yeah, like here's
There's
what's
all kinds of
happening in New
special-
York during the Purge. It's like,
God.
I just found that all endlessly fascinating and makes me want to see more. Like the one thing I'm sad about with this movie was that they didn't go enough into like, I don't know, life outside during the Purge.
They do reveal that the city with the most pent-up violence is Dallas.
Yeah, apparently like 300 people in the town square of Dallas were all hacking at each other.
So that's where all that came from. That was a studio note that showed up the day before we delivered the film.
Oh my God.
They called the director and said, kind of like you said, like we've been indoors. Let's expand this. This is a nationwide event.
Yeah.
Let's hear about what happened around the country. So we quickly wrote, and I think the director and I recorded all this dialogue. We cut it together, made sure it could work. And once that got approved, we brought actors in the next morning.
Wow.
And recorded all that stuff and had the sound team put it together. And then we mixed it. And that was the last day.
Wow.
It's a great way to like leave.
It's a really good idea.
Yeah, it leaves the film kind of ends with like, oh, this family survived and they're kind of a little bit okay. Like one of them died, but then it lets you like sit with like, oh, but wait, like all these people died, and the credits start and you're just sitting there listening to this news broadcast and you're like, wow, shit.
So when you guys were writing those, did you have any inkling because that there could be a sequel or leading into it? Because there's a line in there about I used to believe in the Purge, but then I lost my 2 sons.
I think that's the final line.
And I don't believe it anymore. And that it feels like it's leading right into a sequel, but knowing now that there are sequels, I don't know if at the time when you guys were doing it at the last minute, were you just trying to write some things that seemed to fit?
We one time we had a graphic that said 364 days until the next Purge, but then that just felt kind of funky. But no, I mean we're very excited there's sequels.
Sure,
but yeah, in the moment you don't know that it will. But luckily the test audience were really responding.
Yeah, there is that one line where like the newscaster is like, well, it's going to be 364 long days to the Purge. Like she was like, it's like bummed that it was so far away. I was like,
364 days till Christmas, that kind of thing. It's like,
what are we going to do in the meantime?
Yeah. The newscaster also does specifically say that the stocks for more security systems and guns have gone through the roof overnight.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
The invisible hand of the tape lobby.
Yeah.
So, after the film comes out and ends up being more successful than people thought, right? Like, what was all of that kind of hype like for you?
Oh, it was great. Like just even winning the opening weekend. Like things you're not sure about, especially like a smaller, it's almost slightly counter-programming type film in the middle of the summer when it's wall-to-wall blockbuster films. Like you're not entirely sure, but Universal was really smart where they placed it. And when it hit, it was really exciting.
Great.
Yeah, and as we know, it's become a huge phenomenon. There's a 4th movie coming in a couple weeks. And this movie, I think the Wikipedia says it was like a $3 million budget and made $83 million at the box office. Something like that. So that's amazing for, Blumhouse and everybody involved. Yeah. Universal has the Purge often at their Halloween horror nights.
Yes, we've been through it several times.
And I've heard people say it on like different talk shows and even in other like movies or TV shows, they'll make a joke about the Purge.
Yeah, it's funny
It's
how
almost like part of the vernacular.
Yeah, it's,
Totally.
it's in the zeitgeist. It's like it's something
so cool.
that's
that's what I'm saying about the concept. It's just like such a
Yes,
instantly
absolutely.
amazing
Even
concept.
people
The
that
Purge.
never saw any of the movies know the basic
Yep.
concept of
They'll
the
know what the
crime
Purge
being
is.
legal.
And,
Yeah.
and that's what worked in the test screenings. I don't know if you guys have been to these, but like they'll have the focus group at the end, and they'll say, "Who here thinks this concept works?"
right.
And every hand goes up,
Yeah.
and then the marketing team goes, "Okay, we can sell that because we have a concept that is really exciting and engaging to people."
Yeah.
It really is my favorite type of film. As listeners and people whose podcast know, John Carpenter is my favorite filmmaker, and these really kind of mean, lean, cheaper films that have a message, that have a lot of action and have something to say and don't make a lot of compromises in terms of storytelling and really they exist in a budget where you can make bold choices and do things. They're my favorite type of movies to watch, and it's probably one of the more recent examples of that formula being successful. And not a lot of movies get to do that anymore, and I'd love to see more movies like this because it's just it's my favorite type of movie.
Yeah. Well, luckily there's 3 more for us to watch.
Before we move on to some of our end of episode stuff, was there anything else that you wanted to say about a specific part of this movie or any memories from the production?
Nothing specific. I think you guys covered it really well.
Great.
I'm really excited to be a part of that team.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, as we like to do, we like to give the film a little ranking at the end, give our thoughts a little last touch here. And Pete, if you don't want to participate, that's totally fine. But how many bloody strangers out of 10 would you give this movie?
I give this movie 8 bloody strangers.
Nice. All right. I'm going to give this movie 6 bloody strangers.
I was going to do like a half, but now that we've personified the ranking, I can't cut a person in half.
Can't have a person.
Yeah.
But he's a stranger. Whatever. It's the Purge.
I'm not in the Purge, okay? So it gets rounded up to 8 bloody strangers.
Nice. All right. Yeah. I thought it was a great start to the franchise. And I mean, it definitely does the job of making me want to see more and mainly learn more about the Purge and just like, I'm a mythology guy. So I'm like, I want to learn more about how it was devised and what happens, like, what's happening like out in the world. What's it like to be stuck outside during the Purge or something?
Yeah.
Like that is something I would love to see coming up.
So do we have any predictions for the second one, Purge Anarchy, right?
Yeah. The Purge Anarchy. I don't know.
It's going to be an entire neighborhood fighting against gentrification where they burn down all ramen shops and yoga places and take back their neighborhood.
Yeah. I want to see a battle royale style, the video game thing I'm talking about, not the movie, where 100 people drop in out of a helicopter
On
or
the
something
island,
and they fight to the death.
You want to see 100 Japanese students go at it?
No,
is what
I'm
you're
not
saying?
talking about the movie, but yeah, it's a similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
very
I mean,
similar.
I'll guess just based on the title with the word anarchy being in there, maybe something goes wrong with the Purge, like someone doesn't follow the rules or something.
Class
gets
10
messed up.
politicians back on the menu.
Yeah,
That's
maybe,
right.
maybe.
That's right.
Okay.
That'd be crazy.
I think so. We're kind of wrapping up on the Purge talk, and I want to talk about. We're talking about just editing, and we have this great guest, and I want to talk about one of Justin and I's favorite film experiences in the past few years.
Yes.
Justin and I got to we go to Beyond Fest every year, and they did a screening of Autopsy of Jane Doe.
Oh yeah.
And it was we were blown away by the film, and it was. I don't know if you've been to that festival before, or been to that room, but it is all these horror nerds, and it is some of the most fun screenings.
Yeah.
And that screening, everybody went nuts for that movie.
Was a very
and
fun
it was
film to work
so much fun. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Just working on that film, it knows so well of what type of film it's playing with, and it plays with expectations in a way that's so smart. And if you just want to talk a little bit about that project, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I was brought in to help Andre out with that film, and it was, it's a slower film, and it's designed that way. And he was very meticulous with making it real.
Yeah.
So he wanted the autopsy to be real, and it's not gory to be gory. It's to show you what these guys really do. So it's building this father-son relationship, and then really showing you what an autopsy is, and then twisting it and turning it into like this really interesting mystery of who she is and adding little supernatural elements.
Did you find that like your work on The Purge, where it was kind of like a singular location, really helped with the autopsy of Jane Doe? Because it's also kind of like you're in the mortuary in these very confined rooms.
I didn't think of those things. It may have seeped in, but I treat each project individually.
Nice.
And it's what the script is. It's what Andre shot. And at the end of the day, I think film is a director's medium. So I'm here to help him get his vision on the screen.
Cool.
Okay.
But yeah. I guess there's a similarity.
I was just thinking about
contained in a building.
I feel like that there's two like there's both these movies have this kind of nucleus scene, and I think the autopsy in that one, it really shows you, it's gore, but it's also like the thesis of that whole sequence is that it's a violent world and violent things happen, and it's kind of the same in the scene where they're taping The Bloody Stranger, and like they kind of are these thesis. Like the whole movie and everything that it's about is kind of in those scenes, and the way that you construct them, they're so clear and delicate, and it's really fun to watch.
Oh, thank you.
While we're on the subject of you and your work, what did you go on to do next after The Purge, and what have been some of your favorite projects since then? And is there anything recent you want to plug?
Yeah, I couldn't pick a favorite. I've been really fortunate, and I've worked with like insanely talented people on interesting stories. After The Purge, I did a film, Dark Skies, with the Blumhouse team again. I've done some TV pilots, Shannara. I recently did one for Freeform called Siren. After Autopsy, I did a film with McGee called The Babysitter, which is now on Netflix.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed that. And then I did a film called Polaroid for Dimension, which hasn't released yet.
Yes.
And I'm currently working with New Line on a film called The Children.
Oh,
Nice.
sweet.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Was there any place that people can keep track of what you're up to, or any social things you want to plug?
Nothing social, but
Okay.
IMDb would be
Great.
That'd be the easiest way to follow.
Go see Polaroid when it comes out. That trailer looks
Yeah,
cool.
also definitely watch the autopsy of
Jane
Jane
Doe.
Doe.
Yeah, if you had no idea what they were talking about for the last 5 minutes, it was great. And Justin screened it at his horror movie
That's
night.
right.
And so a big old group of us watched it.
Don't look up spoilers. Just watch it.
Just watch it. Yeah.
It's so great. So great. The experience is awesome. Well, yeah, why don't we wrap things up a bit here? Pete, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, really fun talking.
It has
pleasure.
been
Thank
awesome. It has been awesome.
Yeah.
And so I guess, we'll see everybody next week. But before that, Eliz, where can people keep in touch with us?
Yeah, you can always email us, sequelrights@gmail.com, if you have any questions or suggestions for future franchises. And then you can follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @sequelrights.
And please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Overwatch or wherever you listen to us.
And we'll see you guys next week for The Purge Anarchy.